I welcome everyone. This is a very special edition of Context. I welcome Stephen Wolfe, political philosopher from the United States. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Let's get right just into it. You wrote a book called The Case for Christian Nationalism. Mm-hmm. What is Christian nationalism?
So the way that I present in the book is I break it down from what is a nation to then what is nationalism, and then I talk about it as Christian nationalism. So I start with nation, and I emphasize that the nation is a people with common history, common heritage, a sense of itself, that it exists, that we are, we the people, we are something that is real and not just something imaginary, and that it's connected to a place and a people and a tradition that stretches back generations. And it's also unique. It has its own way of life. So I emphasize that first. And then the nationalism, as I present it, this might be more of an American version of it perhaps. It's less state-centric, it's less government-centered, but it is the people themselves saying, we the people, we are a nation, we have a collective way of life, and the nationalism is saying we want to protect that, we want to preserve that. We have a heritage that through our actions, through both our political activity, our social activity, our culture making, and preservation, that these are the things that we do to preserve us, that preserve we as a people. So that's the nationalism side. The nation is the people, their way of life. The nationalism is saying we the people want to perpetuate ourselves as we see or understand ourselves. And the Christian side is the Christian nation recognizing itself as a Christian people. Again, the nation saying we are a Christian people. And the nationalism is us promoting that fact of us, is promoting the fact that we are Christian. Also, it's the sense of promoting ourselves and the highest good, which is the Christian good, which is worshiping God, which is eternal life. And so Christian nationalism is the nation, the Christian nation, saying we collectively want to order ourselves to the highest good, and that highest good is attaining eternal life in Christ. And so that's how I understand Christian nationalism. It builds from nation to nationalism to Christian nation to Christian nationalism. In that conception, the Christian part, Christianity is a universal religion. So you can have Christianity in England, you have Christianity in America, in Hungary. So that's a universal religion. But a Christian nation itself can be very different in different places. So a Hungarian Christian nation is different than an English Christian nation, an American Christian nation. So the Christianity side doesn't undermine the nation as such. You still have the same customs, way of life. And so the Christian nationalism, it's not trying to make everything universal, not making everything the same. It's not saying, hey, we're all Christian, therefore we can somehow be a common united world brotherhood or whatever, something like that. It's not that universalistic conception. But it's saying that we as a people are going to preserve our way of life, and we're going to preserve our Christian way of life, which is, again, promoting our Christian heritage and our Christian good. Is
it a popular idea in the United States, Christian nationalism? If the term is,
Yeah, the term, it's interesting that there's...
Is it a new term, relatively, or...?
It's fairly new. What's interesting is that the people who have been using it the last 20 years have actually been the left-wing sociologists who do not like what they call Christian nationalism. And what's interesting is when they do their studies and they have their metrics and they say, these 6 points this is what Christian nationalism is, usually it's, honestly stupid. It's very kind of, frankly, mediocre academic work. I'm not a sociologist and I don't do that work, so I'll call it, it's mediocre. But they say that the Christian nationalists actually span 30, 40, sometimes 50% of the country. So to their minds, if you're a Republican, you're conservative, you are a Christian nationalist. And so in that sense, the term is a negative thing. It's used by the left to attack the right. And so in that context, in reading some of their works and just thinking it was just, the work was horrible, I began to think, wait, I'm American, I'm a nationalist, and I'm a Christian. Why can't I be a Christian nationalist? And so that's what began my project of trying to describe as a political theorist, as a Christian political theorist, what this thing, Christian nationalism, is. And so I argued for a positive case for it. And it's actually very different than what the sociologists are describing. And we're 2 years into, the book was published about 2 years ago. And among conservative Protestants, many have started to identify with it, the term. At the very least, it's not just myself, but many others have influenced a wide array of mainly Protestant, some Roman Catholic people, into at least adopting the ideas. So it's not just, some people are afraid of adopting the term itself because it's been so labeled as bad by the left. So they think tactically and rhetorically, it's better they don't adopt, I'm a Christian nationalist. They adopt the ideas and they start arguing for the ideas. And one indicator that it's been influential is really the established Christian circles. So the people who are in the seminaries or they're prominent pastors, they've reacted to this across the board. I've got reviews from Roman Catholics to Reformed people to Methodists, even some Eastern Orthodox have reacted to it. And so the fact that even 2 years later, when the book came out, I'm still getting reviews of the book and commentary. Now, there are denominations, Presbyterian denominations, that are now proposing what they call study committees to go study the book to see what is happening here. So it's hard to judge in terms of numbers, the influence, but in terms of the response, in the conservative Protestant world, it's been pretty significant. And I don't want to take all the credit for that, or even the majority of the credit, but there's just...
Is this a Protestant idea? Or?
Yeah, this would be... Well, my argument's Protestant.
You're Protestant?
I'm Protestant,
okay,
yeah.
No one's perfect, no problem.
Well, I'm a good American, so I'm Protestant. No, I'm kidding. But it is... I mean, my argument is distinctively Protestant, but it's... At the same time, I've been accused of being a Roman Catholic. That's strange, though, even though I'm not. Because some of my ideas do reflect older ideas that, Protestants back in the day did share some things with Roman Catholics. And anyway, but yeah, it's hard to judge the influence, but many people, including myself, have done a lot of work to advance these ideas. And particularly among younger people, it's been actually great. A lot of the older folks are like, what is this thing? They don't like nationalism. But among younger people, it's really kind of taken off. And younger people have become very disillusioned with a lot of the theology and the ideas and the politics of really the politics since World War II. And they're seeing that there needs to be a type of return. They're learning the history of America from the 19th century, and they're seeing that what Americans said, we're a Christian people. We're a Christian nation. And we had laws that reflected the fact that we're a Christian people. And all those were just done away with and eliminated in the 1950s and 1960s, really by a set of men at the Supreme Court, 9 of them. Unfortunately, we're largely Protestant at the time, but but that's part of the problem, yeah. And but nevertheless, we're seeing that we need to escape the current ways of thinking in American politics that have really emboldened the left, and it's made the conservative movement very weak. Mm-hmm. I mean, conservatives have very few victories. The only victory you can probably identify would be tax cuts. One would be tax cuts for the rich. The conservatives got that.
What about the reversal
and also
of
the Supreme
Roe
Court?
Wade?
So I was going to say the Supreme Court is a success story as well, and that is that after the court of the 60s, which was the Earl Warren Court, which was very, very effective. It transformed the country, really the way American life is today is reflected in decisions from the early 60s. But since then, conservatives have been generally successful in the Supreme Court. So that is one of the success stories. And in a way, the Supreme Court now is constraining, in terms of the legal side, is constraining the move of the left from really undermining the Bill of Rights and the Constitution itself. So, but nevertheless, on most issues, the conservative movement has failed. So young people are seeing this. They're conservative, they're religious, they're serious about their faith. They're also serious about their patriotism, their love for their homeland and their country. And so these ideas have been influential on them. And they want to work for a Christian nation. They want to return to a sense of an identity of being an American and Christian and a Christian American.
You said that the older people have an aversion to the term Christian nationalism. Does nationalism sound bad in the United States? Because, you know, in Europe, it sounds bad. It kind of sounds bad after the Second World War. And even, I mean, Christian nationalism, the two together probably wouldn't go so easily because the Christian democracy after the Second World War was also basically based on the idea that the Second World War was caused by nationalism, so we don't like nationalism. So how is it different in the United States?
Yeah, I would say the term is, let's just say, scary to the older people, and that's I would say that's for very similar reasons. So a lot of times they want to distinguish, like, I'm not a nationalist, but I'm a patriot. That's usually how they phrase it. When you get down to what they mean by patriotism, it really is what I mean by nationalism. Not exactly, but close enough. But it's one of, political socialization. What happens is you latch on to scary terms, and you begin in a very simplistic way. It's very easy to rhetorically in politics to have a set of scary words, and then you use those words and attach them to ideas you don't like. And nationalism is one of those words. And that's why many people on my side, they'll contact me and they'll say, I love all your ideas. I love I'm part of it. I love what you're doing. I love what other people, I'm just not going to use the word Christian nationalism because in my circles, when I'm trying to influence, people in my church or online or whatever, or my friends and family, the nationalism word's too scary. It's like, and I reply back, or I talk to them face, like, yeah, that's fine. It's just a term, like it's just a phrase, and I'd rather people adopt the ideas and advance the ideas than they would just use something that would be ineffective. I mean, I want to win, and if winning means in 10 years.
So you mean that's really a movement then?
Yeah, I mean, we're here to start a movement with good philosophical foundations, good theological foundations. It's so we want to be well founded in the soundness of ideas, but it is a movement to win. It's so in the end, like I was about to say, that if 10 years from now no one's using the Christian nationalism, but they're advancing the idea of a Christian nation, fine. Like whatever is going to work rhetorically, with good principle, is fine with me. But you're right. It is considered a scary term. But again, among younger people in the United States, that socialization, that political socialization that made that word scary, is really not as effective as it once was. So a lot of the boomer generation, Gen X, and the millennial generation like mine, we still had that influence. We had television and maybe talk radio, and that had the one combined message, despite disagreements of left and right, was nationalism bad. But the Zoomer, the Generation Z generation, is much less attuned to that socialization mechanism. And so that the terminology and the ideas are, it's not that it's easier to convince them, it's that they don't have the mental block. They don't have that sense of scary, that's scary, we don't do that. So I really have hope for people who are 40 and below. It's very difficult to convince the older folks of these ideas for the reasons I mentioned. But for the younger generation, I do have hope that these things will catch on. But it's going to be a struggle against really the institutions. The institutions are dominated by people who are usually older. Mm-hmm. They're also interconnected in their own little circles. And so what we're seeing now is just, you have a large kind of, the people who are members of churches or are kind of maybe members of certain institutions but not in the leadership, they agree with me and the movement that's been created around it. But it's difficult to get them yet into positions of institutional power because that's controlled by kind of the older establishment that doesn't like, not only the term, they don't like the ideas.
They don't like the ideas.
Yeah.
It seems to me that you have practical goals. You said you want to win. You want to realize the ideas of Christian nationalism in the United States. Does this idea have a footing in politics? So what is the connection between the current Republican Party and Christian nationalism? So is there a political arm of this movement?
There is, within the broader, what you call the New Right. Mm-hmm. The New Right in America, it is broadly a Christian. I don't know that they would all identify collectively, or we, I guess, would collectively identify as Christian. There certainly is a renewed interest in religion in politics that wasn't there before. Mm-hmm. And this would then that broadly would be aligned with someone like J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. More probably J.D. Vance than Trump. But really what Trump allowed, when Trump won in 2016, he showed that you can be an anti-establishment, and win. And he unleashed a lot of possibilities and potential that I credit that his victory in 2016 for whatever success I've had, for other people adjacent to me and others in kind of the New Right, is now we can fight the establishment conservatism, which we think has utterly failed, apart from a few. I mean, really, the Supreme Court is just a check on the progress of the left. It's just basically saying no along the way until it's not an actual positive. It's a negative. It's not a positive in terms of policy. But anyway, we see the potential for the New Right to become more politically influential. And that's one reason why the victory of Trump is very important for 2024. Why in a few months, if he wins, it'll just be emboldened for us on the new American right to continue these ideas. And there is wide reception, even to people who are kind of culturally Christian, but they're right wing, to the idea of returning to a more religious foundation of the country. I think they're beginning to see that our country, we talk about making America great again. The again means to going back to a time when we were a more overtly religious people, even in our own way of the way we understood ourselves. It was essential to our way of life and our understanding of ourselves.
What is it that you are up against politically? So who are they? The other side, who are they?
Well, they of course is the left, but there has been what we've called the post-war consensus, and the post-war meaning World War II, and that post-war consensus was adopted by both the left or the liberals and the established conservatism, and that was basically affirming secularism. It was affirming, in various forms, a form of multiculturalism. It was adopting a type of procedural liberalism, and also the idea that you can't have a sense of of thick moral norms, of a sense of what is right and wrong. And and even if you do, you shouldn't see that enacted through policy. There shouldn't be, in other words, everyone is, or especially on the conservative side, they don't want to see the state as an actor on society to promote what is good and to suppress what is evil. It's more of a neutral public space. You can make your arguments in the public sphere, the public square, but you can't use it as policy to promote a kind of a comprehensive understanding of what is good and right and wrong. And so that's what we're up against. We're up against a kind of consensus that is both the left and on kind of the moderate right. And so I mean that's kind of vague, I guess, but it's significant, and they've established conservatism is terrified of that concept. They don't like the idea of using political power for good. It's very odd. They would be they're very pleased, not pleased, but they're very strangely comfortable with a very degenerate society, a moral drift, and they don't want to do much to stop it.
Isn't it?
And so it's a very broad consensus from the left. So the conservatives might not like the moral drift. They see it like, I don't like that. I don't want my kids to see that. But they're not overly concerned in policy to say that needs to stop. We need to suppress that.
But isn't it deeply ingrained in the American tradition, limited state? You don't want to overreach your powers, and that's why you don't want to promote the good politically or with power, specifically with power. So isn't it the problem that you face with especially Republicans, that this limited state?
Yeah. So I mean that is absolutely, yeah. So the Americans tend to be uncomfortable with the government. They distrust the government. They, especially conservatives, it's very difficult. This is one of the difficult things that we face when just talking to people who would agree with us on policy. They'll talk about they dislike the moral drift and the degeneracy, but they don't want to see government acting to do anything about it. And and that is, in a way, part of the American tradition to distrust the government. But having said that, within the American tradition, we had, for most of our history, we had blasphemy laws, so you couldn't be blasphemy. We had Sunday Sabbath laws for most of our history. We had a collective identity that said we are Christian, and we don't like atheism. We don't. We want to promote. We don't. We want to suppress profanity or impiety. That is just so that is very, very much ingrained into the American political tradition, and it was in the legal system. Like all these laws were in the legal system, and so the use of state power to suppress those things was legitimate. And actually, again, I try to tell people that like profanity laws. Those were on the books, on the law books until the 1960s. I mean, it wasn't until the Supreme Court said that you can curse and you can say whatever you want, and that's considered political speech. So you can't. This is why you can see bumper stickers and they have profanity on them in the United States, whereas 60, 70 years ago, a cop could pull you over and say, no, you can't do that. Nowadays, you can do that because it's considered protective speech. So I just try to remind people that the world that you live in, the world that you were socialized into, the world that you think is normal is actually not normal. This is not the normal American way of life, not the normal sense of the legal system or the government, that we actually were okay with the use of state power to suppress things that we are morally bad. But even apart from the legal and the government system, there also is social power. there's the willingness to cancel, as we say, or to use social harm to suppress certain things. So in the United States, if it comes out that, let's say you're a racist, let's say you've said some things in a private group chat on the phone, or you've said something on Twitter and you're anonymous, but now they've revealed who you are, what we say doxing, if you're doxed. And it was racist, let's say quote racist. A lot of the things people say are not, but anyway, let's say it's deemed racist. The whole world will crash upon you in the American society and destroy you. And this is not illegal. So you can say anything you want almost in the United States in terms of the law. But there's a lot of things you absolutely cannot say
because of social repercussions.
You will lose your job. In the church context, you get kicked out of church, depending on what kind of church you're in. It's very costly. And so what I say to people is like, look, you are very willing, I say to fellow Christians, you are very willing to, to bring high social cost upon the racist. Why not also do that against the profane, or against the atheist, or against the leftist? Why, or like a sort of sexual degeneracy? Why not bring? You're willing to do it against the enemies of the enemies that the left, the people that the left hate the most. You're willing to join the left to destroy the racist or the anti-Semite or whatever. You're willing to do that. Okay, fine. Why not you also use that social power to suppress these other things as well? And for a lot of people, that's like a light bulb moment where they realize, well, yeah, wait, I do participate in social cancellation, and I do think it's right for the racist to suffer costs. So why not these other people who are damaging the country as much or more? And so you don't. I mean, this is the thing. Like, racism is suppressed in the United States, but not through the law. It's suppressed through social power, social force, social harm. Why not also do that same thing? And this is actually, I would say, a good American tradition. You read like 19th century works of Frenchman Alexis de Tocqueville coming to America, and he looks around and says, wow, no one's an atheist here. Like, everyone's a Christian. This is strange. Of course, not everyone was a Christian. There were probably secret private atheism clubs or whatever there was, but they were suppressed. They were. The people said that if you are an atheist, then you're done. Thomas Jefferson, third president of the United States, he almost essentially lost the election because people were accusing him of being an atheist, and he had to kind of defend himself, and he's whatever. But so anyway, that's what I would say to give a very long answer to your question. We don't only need legal means. Why not do the very things we already do, which is suppress through social denunciation?
How would you describe the United States if it's not a Christian nation today? What's the United States today?
I think the core of the country, is still an Anglo-Protestant, an American Anglo-Protestant country. That's the core of it. That's from our political principles, our founding principles. That's what the core is. And I think that's reflected in the way evangelicals vote and their voting behavior. Of course, that core is steadily getting replaced. And once that is gone, if that goes away, then yeah, the America in the old sense, the heritage America, will be eliminated. Among the core, that core Anglo-Protestant country, core of the country, that is kind of a sort of Christian. That would be very Christian. They're tied, even if they're culturally Christian, they're tied to an old kind of American Protestant tradition. Once that's eliminated, I don't know how we can say we're still American in a traditional sense. And
immigration doesn't help.
No, immigration is the problem. Yeah, absolutely. Immigration is a problem. But the thing with the United States is that you have, because of the federal system, you have the federal government, you have the different states. The states have a tremendous amount of power. And so you have individual states that are composed of very different people than who live in, say, Florida, or live in, the Northeast, or live in the Southwest or whatever. And the states themselves have this political power, and they can reassert kind of the old American principles. Like they can resist the federal government. And so part of our immediate work needs to be kind of emboldening Christians to operate at the local and the state level, to say, look, you guys, the states have tremendous power. Like, it's trying to remind conservatives. It's like, I know you're focused on the national, you're watching Trump, Biden, Kamala, but don't forget that your state has tremendous power. In a way, it's a sovereign entity. I mean, there's dynamics there in relations with the federal government, but it's a sovereign entity with lawmaking power, and it can do a lot of good. And so that's the immediate hope, is that we can harness our system, which can really resist the American broader regime and the federal kind of encroachment.
Do you think that the Christian nationalism is a solution to the problems of the United States, or for the whole world, or the Western world? So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think in principle, when I made the argument in the book, I was arguing, I was trying to make, most of the book is not about the United States. I barely mention the United States until the latter chapters. I was trying to give a universalistic Christian political theory. So yeah, I think, I'm American, and so Hungarians will read it and be like, well, that's very American. I'm sure they'll do that. But the idea was to give in a way, a universal theory, a universal Christian political theory that could be applied anywhere. That wouldn't make, if Hungarians read my book and said, oh, let's do this, it wouldn't turn you into an American country. It wouldn't turn France into it wouldn't do any of that. It wouldn't turn China into an American country. But yeah, because I think it's true and universal, I think it is I guess the solution to the world. But each country, that would look different. So England has their Church of England, and they have their bishops, and the United States, we don't have that. So American Christian nationalism is going to look very different than other countries. And yet I think that because I argued for it, I think it's true. And so yeah, I do think it would be, I guess, the ultimate world solution.
I think one of the most interesting statements of your ideas is that the nation is some kind of natural entity. So it's not an historical entity. It's not something which is only a probability. It's because we used to learn that it's a construct. Nation is a construct, and it could be differently. But if I understand well, your statement is that it's not. It couldn't be otherwise, because it's somehow deeply ingrained in human nature to live in a nation.
Yeah, and by nation, I don't mean necessarily like a nation state. And I mean, it's natural in the sense that we are born into a community, and we're relatively isolated from other communities. And so we naturally we develop a way of life that is different from other places. And that's natural just because we're in a way limited beings. We don't have knowledge right now of what's happening outside this room, let alone in China. And before internet and communication technology, that was of course even more restricted, where many people never traveled more than 10 miles down the road to go anywhere in their life. And so their whole world, in a way, is with a particular people in a particular place. And I think the way that God designed us was that we can be different. We can be in the world in very different ways. We can dance differently. We can have different languages. We can have different means that we greet one another, or we whatever you guys like, espresso, and I drink regular things like that.
You drink this big one from
I drink the big I drink
big hot one. Okay.
I drink the gallon of coffee every day that I pour. That's
weird. I'm sorry.
So there are these differences, right? I also don't pay for my water when I go to a restaurant, and
okay.
I'm just kidding. That was one of the interesting things, that pay for water, but so there's just differences in different places, and those will naturally arise from human interaction, and that's what a nation eventually develops that way. You go from villages to like towns to to cities to nations. So you have this sense of oneness from your own interaction with others. And I just think that's natural. That should just be obvious to us. That's why there's differences in language, and when you encounter people who even like know your same language, but as a second language, you can see the barriers in communication. Even when they I've been in Europe about 10 days now, and people wonderfully know English, and they're very pleasant in Europe, and I've had a great time here. But there are communication barriers, and there's difficulties in understanding exactly what do we do, or what are you saying, and that's just natural, and I think that's a good thing. I think in the end, like in Revelation 7, chapter 7, it's called the congregation of the nations, where in heaven you see a multiplicity of tribes, tongues, and nations, essentially awaiting to kind of enter heaven together. And there's something, I think, pretty beautiful about that we are designed such that we would create this sort of colorful differences. Because I think it's in difference it's in difference and contrast that something becomes beautiful. It's in the variety of things, even within a nation itself, that it's the variety that creates beauty. And I think in the end, it's a picture of God's wisdom in His design for man, that we would create that we would, by our own kind of interactions of everyday life, creating these differences that are different but good.
What if there are other nationalisms? So how important is the Christian part of the term? What kind of other nationalisms do you register? I think the Christian part has to be central. Mm-hmm. When you think about what's the human good, there's human goods of water and food, and then maybe higher up there's interaction and talking about ideas. There's the exchanging of goods and services in an economy. There's contemplating philosophy. There's all these goods that we can do in life. But the highest good is the eternal good. The highest good is a good attained outside of this life. It's the highest good is your citizenship in heaven. And that's all attained through faith in Christ. And so the Christian element is central. If you're going to understand the hierarchy of human goods, that spiritual good, the good of eternal life, is the highest good. And so the Christian element is crucial. It means that the nation itself is acknowledging that we, through the various means ordained of God, are to promote that good amongst each other. Not force it. You can't force someone to believe. You can't do a law that says you'll be Christian, and then all of a sudden everyone's Christian. But there are various means, like a Sunday Sabbath law, which means that ordinary commerce is illegal. That promotes worship on Sunday. Suppressing blasphemy promotes the good of acknowledging and worshiping God. So I think that the Christian element has to be central as just basic, human anthropology, which is that there's a highest good attained through Christ, and so other nationalisms that would be contrary to Christian nationalism would be bad. I'll just put it simply.
The only good nationalism is a Christian nationalism. So let's leave it at that.
Okay. There's a very interesting idea you put forward, and that is the idea of a Christian prince. We usually don't associate Christianity with the book Prince by Machiavelli, but you still put forward. So what does a Christian? And we already touched on this issue with the question of power and how you use political power. So what do you mean by the term the Christian prince?
So it's the fact that Machiavelli used it is purely accidental to my usage. So I wasn't appealing, and I do not cite Machiavelli. I'm not a Machiavelli hater, by the way, but it wasn't.
Yeah, it's more complicated. Yeah,
he's not my source for that. Actually, in the Protestant and Roman Catholic political tradition, using the word prince was very common. No one would have been offended in the 15th, 16th, or 17th centuries.
Only afterwards. Oh, everybody connects this term with Machiavelli.
Oh yeah, they connect it with that. I mean, actually, the United States, a lot of them connect it with like tyranny or a dictator. So I hear both. But I wanted to. I didn't want to use the word. I guess if I could have used another word, it would have been statesman. That's a very kind of American English sort of word to use for that. That's probably the closest term for that. But I wanted to say that like we want inspiring leaders and we want Christian leaders, but we don't want them to be just policy wonkish guys. We want them to be people who have a sort of presence, a gravitas, and there's something inspiring about them towards national greatness. You think of, I mean, I don't think Donald Trump is a Christian prince, but the first assassination attempt, he gets shot in the ear, and his first instinct is to stand up and go fight, fight, fight. That is the sort of action of what I think of as a prince, someone who can inspire the nation to its greatness. But again, like the way that each country would understand what a Christian prince is it'll depend on that country. So when I think of America, I think of the Christian prince is like George Washington. George Washington was not only a brilliant or a great military leader. Some people doubt he was a great military leader, but he was a successful military leader. Let's put it that way. He was adored by the people, president twice. He could have been the monarch. He could have been the monarch of America if he really wanted to, and he declined all that. He presided over the formation of the Constitution at the framing convention. And then after he died, people would have like little busts of his head on their mantle in their living room for decades after he died. And why is that? Because he was an adored figure. So his farewell address, he was president twice, and presidents give these farewell addresses. And in his farewell address near the end, I mean, you can read it and you can tell that he knows that he is the guy. He held this thing together. They had, there was all sort of turmoil after the revolution. There was turmoil during his presidency. There was squabbling between the states, and it was Washington, the man, not just the political ruler, but the man who held it all together. And you can tell in his farewell address, he's like, look, I'm retiring. I'm going back to the farm. I'm going to enjoy my retirement. And now you guys have to figure this thing out. But my point is that he was a sort of American prince in that way, without using that terminology. And I think that in our future, we need people like that. We need a lot of the conservative people are just not inspiring. They might know policy, they might know how to rub shoulders with the powerful people in D.C., but they are
cut taxes.
What's that?
To cut taxes, maybe.
Yeah, but they're not. They're not these people that inspire national greatness. And there's something in Trump that is, even though he's Trump, there's something about him where I like to say he's in a way preparing the way for someone to be like that. And I'm not calling for a tyrant or like that, but there just has to be this figure that looks at the American people and says, we can make America great again, and it actually happens.
What are the prospects of Christian nationalism for the United States and for Europe, in your opinion?
I'm less familiar with Europe, but I think places like Hungary, there's great potential on the ground, largely because of homogeneity from a Christian heritage, and I think, as far as I know, the government has promoted the Christian religion and funded churches and encouraged piety, so that's very good. In America, we're at it's a difficult situation because of demographic change. There's lower religiosity, and it's a challenge for us. I'll be very, very honest. Like I'll put the political theorist hat on and not the movement theory or the movement guy hat on. The political theory guy, just assessing on the ground. It's a very challenging situation. So the prospects for it, it's one of those things where I'm committed to pursuing it to the end, and my friends are committed to pursuing it to the end. And one of the things that occupies our attention is trying to how do we influence the nation towards these ideas. And one of the things is that things change quickly. Like we tend to get in the post-war kind of liberal mindset, we tend to have this idea that nothing really happens. Nothing really happens. We think something's about to happen, but nothing actually really happens. And there's an element of that that's actually very true. But the way things are going, you wonder if that things can change rapidly, and we have to just prepare for that reality. And so, in the end, I think my ideas are true, and I think they'd be good for my country and other countries, and I'm going to pursue them and argue for them as best I can.
Thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Yeah, thank you. It's fun.
And I want to thank my viewers as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we're going to meet you next time. Bye.